Sue's getting good classes.
Okay.
So she's getting more than 20 most of her classes anyway, not all of them, but most of them. And the woman in the East Coast also does exercise. She's getting good classes as well with her exercises. And she did one class. What is the day? Today's Wednesday. It must have been Monday, I think, or maybe it was Friday, where she comes from what's that town on the East Coast? You're in Brisbane, and she's in Melbourne. Melbourne. Yeah, she's in Melbourne, and she just walked down the main street for her class, and showed the street and the buildings and talked about them and so on. And she had really a big class. We're not quite sure what the numbers were, but probably close to 100. Okay.
Gee whiz. Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's anyway, it's one of those things. So yeah, I'm just attracting from my negativity. I'm attracting more negativity, but it's anyway. Something's got a trigger, and I know that historically something's got a trigger, and then just like instantaneous, because it's a brain thing, and whatever it is, it's a brain chemical thing, and and I'm not sure what that trigger is. Sue says, I've been like it ever since I kicked your son out of the house. That was very, very traumatic for all of us, but for both of us. But anyway, I haven't been the same since then. So that was the trigger, I guess. And it says, she says, just slowly got worse and worse each day.
Well, that's no good.
Yes. Anyway, you were going to talk. What was the subject you mentioned we must talk about this one?
Can't remember.
You're not. I can at least remember. Okay.
Can you? Oh, good. Okay. Yes. Well, refresh my memory.
Eating the forbidden fruit.
Was it?
It was absolutely. I remember clearly. You said that's a good subject for our next meeting.
Okay. So what have you got to say about it?
No, you were the one who said it was a good meeting, a good subject.
Eating the forbidden fruit. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about descending, weren't we?
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly what we were talking about. And you've got to level off and start ascending. And
so the term eating the forbidden fruit. So my sense of that is it was about a time in the past when people perhaps put the pursuit of knowledge as the priority, perhaps? Is that kind of what eating the forbidden fruit was? Because it was related to knowledge, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it went back to Adam and Eve, okay, and the tree of good and evil, okay, and Eve was told not to eat the forbidden fruit on that tree of, I guess, good and evil, okay. In other words, I would imagine that by eating that, you then created a whole new universe of duality, and they then fell from the the non-duality dimension that they were in into the duality that we are currently in. So what was it that was so forbidden? They said it's good and evil. Okay, don't eat of good and evil. And who warned her? It was a serpent, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, was it the serpent that warned? I don't know. Someone warned.
Yeah. Or was it Adam that had been told, and Adam then passed that on to Eve? Because Adam was certainly knew about it, and so what tempted her? Maybe it was the serpent that tempted her.
But it was definitely a descent, wasn't it? So they were at a higher plane, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was. I think that's where you were probably thinking at the end of our last conversation. Was probably that. So, what is it telling us today in 2021? Because do we still continue descending? By involving ourselves in what? In duality, in good and evil? Because both good and evil will give us karma. It won't help us. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic in the sense that the sort of mental challenge that I'm having at the moment with it is being careful not to get hooked up in a too literal meaning from a traditional story, because obviously a number of those traditional stories can be misconstrued because the emphasis is placed on the wrong things, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the symbolism of is carried through, and that what you and I are dealing with now is what with our consciousness, whatever that is, how can we look at that symbolism and make it some sort of reality for us now?
Because what comes to mind for me is with anything like that is, how is the pattern repeating itself? Because invariably when these things happen, it doesn't just happen once. It forms a pattern which repeats itself. So for example, your state of mind at the moment, is that a pattern which is repeating itself? Because your perception is it's getting worse over the last 10 days. So to use the analogy, you just find yourself descending.
Right.
So is there a call there, in terms of the symbolism, that at any point on any issue, you can stop. You have a choice. You can stop and change your trajectory from one of descent to one of ascent.
Yeah, well, let me share with you today. I had 2 classes today, and the first class, I was speaking about health, and I was speaking about the gut microbiome and the herbs and stuff like that, and how it affects certain things. Anyway, the long and short of it, besides just having a single figure attendance in that, I finished off that class, and then the next class was a travel class, travel to the Vatican City, and I didn't want to. I was feeling so shitty that I was going to just miss the class. Okay, and never ever done that before, and obviously you get penalized for not launching the class, but I did. I opened it and I launched it, and I got into it, and it really went from bad to worse during the class. Okay, there were certain things I was going to show. Interestingly enough, the one was a painting, and I think the painting is called "The Last Days." Okay, and it's in one of the old museums in the Vatican City, and it depicts sort of God right at the top, and then Jesus next to him, and then masses and masses of people, and they're mostly naked, but subtly naked, and the angels halfway down, and then there's water, and people are being pushed into the water, and depicted as hell underneath at the bottom. I guess so descending again. There's a picture of that whole process, and in the URL where I found it was Google's arts and culture .google.com, and it had a certain when I looked at it the first time, it had a certain you looked at the picture and you clicked, and then it highlighted, went into, let's say, the left side of the picture where the angels were giving away crowns and things like that, and then eventually it went down to the bottom, and then the last picture was showing Jesus commanding and the last days of creation. I suppose it could be called Armageddon. I don't know, but the functionality didn't work for me. Okay, when I went in the class live, it just didn't work. Okay, showing those things and highlighting those things, and it just, that's what I mean. It's just things just getting worse each time. I mean, there's no how embarrassing it is to tell people about what they're going to see, and then it doesn't happen. Okay. And I had actually tested it before the class as well, and I thought, well, I know this is the sort of highlight of my class. Let me just make sure all was working, and all was working, but it wouldn't work when I was in the class. So that's what I mean about, things just at the moment just keep on becoming worse and making me more and more not angry, not frustrated. Just feeling like, I want to go to sleep, and just sleep and sleep and sleep. So I don't know, in that where I have a choice, because that's what you were saying. Some of the things outside of I did make a choice to carry on with the class and not just not go to the class, which was very tempting, but I didn't succumb to that. I guess. And now this afternoon I'm supposed to be, researching for early next week's classes, and then I just went and lay down, and I slept for half an hour, and until Sue came home with this painting, the frame, and so so that's what I mean. I don't know whether when somehow you're in this frame that I'm in, or when I'm in this frame that I'm in, whether you do make choices. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Okay, but the choices are, whereas before, I'm hungry, I just have some junk food. You know, when I'm not in this frame, I will eat, you know, I will snack on healthy food. Okay? But now, whenever in this mood, anything that's available, you know, is I'll eat. I couldn't, the attitude appears to be in this frame, I couldn't care a hell. You know, it doesn't matter. Okay. And you make decisions. And so when I'm in my normal state of mind, okay, whatever normal is, then, you know, I tend to be, I know I am a positive and look forward to my lessons, look forward to researching. It comes naturally. It's something that's there. But, you know, when I'm in this mood, it does not. It also comes naturally. But it's the other Michael I used to call this. I mean, I've had it all my life, okay? It comes and goes. I've had it when my kids were growing up, and they used to call it Dad 1 and Dad 2. You know? And somehow, you know, never, it happens far less frequently, but it's usually something that triggers it, okay? Like, you know, Michael's fight with me, I guess, and getting rid of him, so that triggered it, and I think that's something to trigger it back. It will suddenly trigger back, but I don't know what's going to cause the trigger. It's not a decision that I can make. Does that make any sense to you? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does. No, it does. Yeah. So you've sort of identified, you know, that conflict that day. So what was going on there for you when that happened? I mean, I remember the day because it was extremely stressful for you. It was a horrible day, you know.
Right, absolutely.
Almost traumatic, I would classify it as.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that I think is an understatement. And I can picture it still clearly. And you know, I know exactly what happened. And
so pretty raw emotion was happening, huh?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was raw emotion, but it was also like the last straw. I think things had built up with Sue and myself, you know, against him, just being so the way he was. There's no need to. I told you all about.
And I think the tricky thing about those things, particularly when it's someone close to the family, in my experience anyway, is trying to differentiate between bad behaviour and not wanting to avoiding the temptation to roll it into that's a bad person. Because for me, just speaking from my experience, you know, when I feel that way about a situation or a person or, you know, or something like that, that is part of a discipline that I have to put a lot of energy into to make sure that I do differentiate the two. Because when it comes down to it, for me, you know, when I think about the whole idea of love and love in action, is that, you know, falling into the abyss of hating someone is a very different outcome compared to hating what someone has done. And one of them winds up extremely tight, whilst the other one gives you some space to get through it and get past it. And one of them also leaves the door ajar where the other one just closes it. So, and the other thing for me, and I find it really hard sometimes, really hard, is that when I'm in that mode where I just can't stand someone. Like, I'll give you a really, really trivial example, and you'll probably think I'm a nutcase, but anyway, is on the local TV. I know I don't watch it very often, but every now and again, just because of the time of the day, like I'll come home and I'll make some food, and I just want to sit down and maybe just catch the news headlines. I don't know why I want to do that, because I always get disgusted with them. But anyway,
Yes.
but notwithstanding that, the weatherman comes on, and I cannot stand this. his method of presentation. That's what I cannot stand. His method of presentation. And on occasion, like after I've had a tough day, I'll even find myself, well, not so much shouting, but making comments to him on the TV.
Okay.
So you're an absolute idiot. What a wanker! Like, what? Why on earth are you there? You know, like, which in reflection, is quite silly. But anyway, but
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but I do need to, for me anyway, as part of my personality, I need to put a lot of energy and attention to that when I find myself, particularly in a conflict situation or something that I don't like, to make sure that I don't trip over that line of condemning the behaviour versus condemning the person.
Yeah.
Because that's a line that once I cross that line, it doesn't do me any good at all. At all.
Yeah, I understand that, and you're quite right that I condemned the person and the continuous non-stop actions. So I did both, and understand that that was my trigger, if you like. Subsequent to the event, I've been understanding that he needs to be freed from my clutches or my claws, from that judgment that I took on him, and so does Sue. That we're now talking about him being family and leave him free. He's going through some issues, and him, if he ever had to come back, he would not be welcomed into our house to stay, but we'd welcome back as a family member. Okay,
but the other thing too that you shouldn't discount, and I'm sure you haven't, is that as a result of that breakdown, the incredible blessings that have come through, like with reconnecting with the grandchild and the grandchild's mother and all of those sorts of things, which were probably unlikely to happen any other way, probably, because whilst he was on the scene and exercising the influence that he was exercising, there probably wasn't going to be an opportunity for that to actually happen, So
yeah.
And you'd have to think, based from what you told me, that's got to be a far better outcome for both the child and the child's mother than the day before that horrible event. So.
You're spot on. I mean, at the moment, they're just like such a happy family, and to see both children and the mother, the fun and the way they, put their arms out, and we're now part of a family now again, and it's beautiful. Every day we go and pick up the kids from school, or Sue does most days, and so she gets to see the kids for a few minutes every day from picking them. The mother comes from work and picks them up from our house, and that helps the mother enormously. You get to hear the latest kids' stories and things, and so it absolutely is. I mean, a beautiful thing is unfolding there.
And I think the other context that goes hand in hand with what you've experienced, in my view, is the healing side of the illness. And the illness in its own sort of way hasn't been confined to him, because that behaviour has also made you and Sue sick as well. you know. So
Yeah.
you've got your own healing to do,
Right.
you know, and certainly not fall into the trap of trying to fix him, because
Yeah.
that's his responsibility, no one else's, you know. So
Sure. Sure.
mm.
But we're not making it worse for him with our attitude, you know.
Oh,
So,
absolutely not. I mean,
yeah.
you've been
Yeah.
entirely, you know, conciliatory and constructive and all of those things, you know. I mean, so that's not in question at all. But at the same time, though, you know, you had to deal with a really, really difficult situation, you know, which probably hurt you a lot more than you're probably prepared to acknowledge at one level too, perhaps. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I agree. And very similar things that Sue said as well today, in fact.
mm,
So, so
mm.
yeah, I guess so. You don't really know to what level it affects one.
No, well, no, that's right, and you know, and that's the trick of sort of bringing awareness to it too. You know, like there's things I find myself, you know, where see, I have this nasty habit sometimes of just overthinking things. You know, like I'll wake up at 1:30 in the morning just thinking about something, and if I'm not careful to be conscious about that thought pattern,
Mm.
it can run away and take you down all sorts of dark, you know, gullies and crevices and
Okay.
stuff like that.
Right.
And with the big temptation of just replaying and replaying and replaying
Mm.
and rehearsing, you know, scenarios and stuff like that, which is all just fantasy, like an autistic fantasy, you know, it's just claptrap, you know. And I personally know when I'm doing it generally, and that's something that I have to put a lot of energy into to just stop, you know.
Mm. Mm.
And sometimes some of those things involves talking out loud to myself,
Okay.
you know, like, and it'll just be like one of those sort of like personal triggers for me is I just, you know, find myself all wound up about something, and then I just sort of stop with it. And I say, oh, Don, just stop it, you know, like, you
Yeah.
know, or I came across that Zen technique where you just stop and you physically clap your hands really loud, you know.
Right.
It just got to break that thought pattern, you know, and it's usually a, an outward physical expression in some way, whether it's sort of talking out loud or clapping the hands or whatever it takes to stop it, you know.
That's interesting because you've reminded me of how Sue and I in South Africa used to deal with this. A friend of ours, in fact, it was somebody I used to mentor, a business owner, and he had this philosophy which we then experimented with it, or action,
Mm.
and it really worked. And I'm going to try it now after we finish talking. Okay. He used to say, all you got to do is say loud and forcefully, I like myself, I like myself, I like
Mm.
myself, I like 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 myself.
Mm.
So, and I hadn't thought of that. Thanks for reminding me.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
And sometimes too, you know, it's that, you know, well, again, even this morning, just listening to that audio book that I've been listening to for quite a while now, you know,
Yeah.
he was quoting another author, and I can't remember who it was, but
Mm.
this other author was talking about extreme violence and murder, and 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 his quote was to the effect that, well, we've all killed someone, you know, and in the sense of when you get wrapped up in those situations, you might live some sort of autistic fantasy where you do actually go and kill someone, you know, like
Yeah.
it's. And he sort of says, "Oh, we've all done it." And I think even Shakespeare, with a lot of this sort of Shakespearean sort of thing, you know,
Yeah.
he was saying, "Oh, the reason that Shakespeare was, or one of the reasons that Shakespeare was, you know, held out to be quite a genius was his ability to put himself into generally ordinary people's shoes and articulate things like that, you know, that, oh,
Yeah.
I hate this person so much. I wish, you know, and my mother says all the time, oh, they just need their head pushed underwater, you know.
Okay.
You know, or something like that, you know, and you think, yeah, well,
Yeah.
fortunately, we have the presence of mind to stop it before it reaches an action. You know?
Right. Right. Yeah.
But
But we still eat the forbidden fruit.
well, that's the issue, you know, like the sin has already been committed.
Yes.
Just through the thought process, you know. So
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the forbidden fruit. Yeah. That
well,
thought process.
it sounds
Part of it. Yeah.
sounds like it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure we've all had these sort of, you know, maybe after dinner conversations or something when you talk about, you know, violence or something like that, and you think, oh, you know, how could they possibly do that? You know, well, you know, I know I've talked to my brothers who both have served in, you know, high conflict areas in the military, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, and I remember having this conversation with my younger brother because generally they don't like to talk about those situations where they were in the middle of something that was like pretty bad, you know. I remember my younger brother was telling me, like, when he was in Afghanistan, he did a tour over there, and part of the role was, you know, like training the local military, you know, giving them skills to deal with different situations and that.
Yeah.
You know, and he was sort of saying, you know, that one of the hardest things that he ever had to deal with at a personal level over there is that part of that local culture there was it was considered okay, you know, to go and rape children, particularly young boys. And he said, you know, like you'd be going somewhere, like you'd be traveling somewhere, and all of a sudden it'd be like, stop, 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 stop. We've got to stop. And it's like, what's going on? And they'd off the vehicle and they'd see some kids down there and they'd just run down and they'd rape these boys and stuff like that.
Goodness me.
And the problem was for them is that, you know, he said, like, well, we're in their country. It was sort of a cultural nuance sort of thing. And he said, but he said, the amount of personal discipline you had to apply that you didn't want to just pick up your gun and just shoot them, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was in that situation where, you know, this horrible act was unfolding right before your eyes, and what could you do? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What could you do? Mm.
That's horrible, eh? Absolutely. But your point taken there.
You know, you think about those extreme situations, you know, so
Yeah.
where, you know, apparently it's a lot easier for us to have the thought process and not let it convert into action.
Yeah.
But clearly, when you watch the news headlines every night, there's a bunch of people out there who do let it go into action.
Yeah, absolutely. And time and again. Yeah.
Every day, in fact. You know.
Yeah, every day. You're right. Okay. And so, as much that's the reason, you know, as much as your brother, you know, hated being there, we hate the news. Okay, because we see in the same or a similar thing that, you know, is abhorrent to us. Yeah.
And I think part of the other cultural conditioning, particularly in the Western societies, you know, I remember reading a short article a little while ago about abuse of women, like, you know, domestic violence and things like that. And it was really quite subtle too, because I hadn't even thought about it in my own mind. In this sort of context, is that a lot of the language is conditioned around taking the male out of the conversation. So we talk about violence to women rather than men committing violence. You know?
Okay.
So we talk about, you know, these women who have been subject to a domestic violence. Well, the man doesn't even get mentioned in that statement. Why don't we say? Why isn't the statement how many men are committing domestic violence?
Yes. Mm.
And that puts them, and it's only, well, hopefully only a small number of perpetrators,
Yeah.
puts the spotlight right on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so the women are the victim, but the perpetrator of the crime doesn't even get mentioned in the statement. You know, and it wasn't until I thought about it, you think, you know what, that's true.
It is, eh? Yeah.
The men had, you know, the political nuance around it is that's where the problem is over there. These women who are being abused, but at no stage does the abuser get mentioned. It's all about those
Subtle,
women.
eh? Never realized that. You're so right. Eh? Yeah. Very subtle. And brainwashing.
It is, isn't it? You know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and you just think about that, and you think, wow, you know, like, and for me, it was a real sort of wake up call, and one of the little things now, whenever I see these, like there might be a news report about, you know, horrible domestic violence or something like that, and even in those news reports, the majority of the airtime is given to the victim.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, this happened and that happened and this and that and that, which is horrible. But where is the analysis and the attention about the perpetrator of this? You know, and the well, a bit like the Afghanistan example in one sense. What are the cultural factors which are driving this that the spotlight isn't put on there? You know. You know, and it could be any sort of abuse, you know, like child abuse or postnatal depression or whatever, you know, it's always on, you know, this sort of reality TV, you know, or, you know, let me swim in that person's misery, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this sort of voyeuristic sort of approach, isn't it, you know, so. And I wonder at some level whether, again, that's sort of very convenient, because when it comes to personal responsibility, you know, even the idea of just taking personal responsibility for how I feel, you know, which is what you were sort of struggling with today in one sense, you know, and to your credit, you didn't walk away from it, you know, you just said, no, I'm having a shitty day, but, you know, could always be worse.
Yeah, got a responsibility. Yeah. Maybe it was more than that too.
Well,
yeah.
And I'm not trying to sort of diminish it or cheapen it by any stretch. I don't want you to think.
No, I understand.
And I'm not even trying to fix it, because I'm just trying to maybe just think about things a bit differently, because I spend a lot of my time trying to think about things a bit differently now.
Yeah.
You know, in my younger days, and not that too distant past, you know, it would always be, well, again, part of that conditioning, you know, or, you know, these things are worth fighting for. So straight away, it takes you into a conflict situation.
Yeah.
Isn't that worth fighting for? Or, you know, oh, I've been diagnosed with cancer and I'm going to fight it to the end.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Very rarely, perhaps, I wouldn't say never, but very rarely would you hear someone say, I'm going to make sure I die well. Because to die well automatically infers that you have to live well.
Yeah.
You can't die well without living well. It's a prerequisite to dying well.
Okay.
And if you're going to die miserably, guess what? You have to be miserable before you get there.
Yeah.
But it's a tricky space, Michael. It really is. It is a tricky space. And as I said, I don't want to make light of it or trivialize it, because it's something that I struggle with every day as well, you know, so in my own way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you have the blessing of having Sue there. You know what I mean? What a wonderful counsel. You know. So.
Yeah, but she's also been depressed for the same period of time. Okay,
Mm.
um, doesn't express it.
Mm.
Every now and again, like today, she would, but
Mm.
otherwise she just, you know, I tend to verbalize it because, you know,
Mm.
somehow it seems to help me, I guess, but it probably brings other people down too. I'm not sure, but
I think it's an important thing to do to try and get it out of your head too. You know, like for me, when I get wound up tight in something that is sort of takes, you know, the black dog comes calling on it. Sometimes for me, the only way I can express it is to sit down and just write about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm the same with talking. You know,
Mm.
I think once you talk about it, it somehow gets it a little bit more in perspective.
Mm.
It makes it not that serious anymore.
Mm.
Somehow, you know, otherwise you're bottling it up,
Mm. And it
and
becomes
it,
very sticky, doesn't it? You know.
yes, it does.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
Mm.
Anyway,
Mm. There's
I think
lots of
some.
things that people talk about and that, you know, but you know, this is not the first time you've experienced it, so I'm sure you have
No,
your own toolkit as to how you work through some of these things too. So.
you know, yeah, you're quite right. It's not the first time by any matter of means.
Mm.
I've lived with it all my life, but you know, at the time that it happens, you know, I think maybe the first 3/4 of my life, I wasn't aware.
Mm.
Okay, so when the kids used to say, you know, "Dad too," or something,
Mm.
um, you know, I used to deny it because I was who I was at that moment. Okay, I
Mm.
wasn't anybody else, and they could see it, and my previous wives could see it, um, but I couldn't. So it was only, you know, maybe in the last 20 years or so that I could start to recognize, you know, like I can today, absolutely recognize, you know, that I'm a, you know, a different person.
Mm.
Actually, I feel and look and act and talk like a different person to
Mm.
what I was or what I am truly. Okay,
Mm. Mm.
uh, so the uh, so now it's quite easy for me to recognize it, and I love being in my normal position, which I'm generally, you know, this year been almost the entire year in the good person's side, if you like, and the,
Mm.
you know, enthusiastic, looking forward to gardening and doing
Mm.
gardening, and now I think of gardening, I want to puke, you know,
Mm.
and you know, and I want to club the you know, turn out my microgreens that won't grow and, you know, throw the
Mm.
trays and all away, not only the soil, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's and I find there's no way to deal with it. Okay, being aware of it, you can, I guess, protect other people. You can also, I'm able to put on a mask. Okay, so when I've got to do things or I'm talking to somebody, and I can put on a mask. And it's somebody who knows me, you know, will recognize it straight away.
Mm.
I mean, my kids will recognize it straight away as well. Um, but generally, you know, somebody in class wouldn't recognize it. Okay.
Mm.
Anyway, I see the black parrots have suddenly appeared again, going to tear apart our bottle brush bush.
They're quite vigorous, aren't they? The way they
Yeah,
attack.
they attack and destroy. Eh? Um, and
And
apparently they don't.
some of
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason about it. It's just almost like vandalism, isn't it? You know, it's
Yes.
just like,
Yes, it is. you know, and we watch them because we've got one right, you know, over our garden wall, and sometimes they come and they eat, that's fine. But then other times they just like claw it, pull it off and drop it. Anyway, there's apparently only one grouping of them, one flock of them in Western Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are they are they endangered or?
No, they're actually not. They're not indigenous to Western Australia. Okay?
Oh, okay.
To Eastern Australia, yes. Okay. And there's just this one large flock that roams the whole of Perth. Okay. And she was actually saying, the person that framed this picture that I showed you now, he said, it was his turn yesterday, and they arrive, and they're not only the bottle brush, but also the frangipani, the traditional frangipani that comes into a tree. He says that's one of their favorite. Okay, and they just come in when they're in flower and take it apart. Okay, so and they're big. They're big fellows too. Eh?
Yeah, they are big, aren't they? The black ones.
Yeah, they're much bigger than all the others that we get here. I mean, I'm looking at others feeding right now, and
so are those the ones that have the red blush on their cheeks?
You're not the black ones, no.
No, okay.
No, they're pure black. Okay. No, the others have yellow necks and green necks, and some have red heads, and they're the smaller variety. We get about 5 or 6 different varieties that feed in our garden, excluding the blacks. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a good place for us to stop them.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it.
Yeah. Thanks very much for chatting.
No, of course, anytime. And I hope you reflect your way through it, and
Definitely, I'll get through it. It could be the next moment quite easily. I just don't know what gets me through it. But I do, and often I just wake up and it's gone. So
yeah.
Okay, well, thanks
very good.
much.
Okay, and you take care, and I'll talk to you on the weekend, eh?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Sounds good.
Thanks very much, man. Cheers, man.
See ya.
Bye.